Well, the last few years have been a bit rough on Star Wars fans. With the exception of the first season of The Mandalorian, almost all subsequent releases were either a creative failure or just another mediocre addition to the Disney collection. The recent Star Wars trilogy had some promise in the beginning, but it was proved to be mostly disastrous.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Solo has already been forgotten from existence, and Boba Fett and Kenobi haven't exactly been beaming with quality. So with all that in mind, I wasn't really expecting all that much when it comes to Andor. Although I really liked Rogue One, I never saw much potential in the character of Cassian Andor. He was a stoic and grim assassin that finds meaning in the cause of the rebels. His character arc was completed in the movie, so I wasn't particularly moved when the prequel was announced. I thought we were just going to get another blunt and mediocre Star Wars TV show, but after watching just 3 episodes of the first season, I have to say I was wrong about everything. Andor is good. It's more than good, actually. There are moments when it really shines. Andor is a grim and dark crime/political thriller about a small-time thief that goes against the status quo. And in this particular instance, the status quo is the Empire, a brutal, galactic-wide authoritarian regime that is portrayed as a much more layered and complex institution than the previous installments of it. And mostly that has to do with the sheer quality of the writing. Tony Gilroy is a pretty good storyteller and has a knack for writing characters that are on the run from powerful and shadowy authority structures. He did a similar thing when he wrote the Jason Bourne films. Tony Gilroy takes a simple idea, a small-time thief going against the Empire, and elevates the concept into a multi-layered story about authoritarian regimes, corruption, loyalty, and strangely so about the dangers of fascism. In the first episode, while searching for his sister, Cassian Andor finds himself killing 2 security officers that work for the Empire, although it would be more appropriate to call them rent-a-cops, judging by how little authority they hold. The first cop was mostly an accident, but the second killing was clearly intentional. It shows that Cassian Andor is not a man to be trifled with. The series might start with the murders of the cops, but that's not exactly what kicks off the story. What gets the gears rolling is when Cyril, the deputy supervisor of the security apparatus that governs the planet, is denied permission to hunt down the murderer by his boss. The reasoning being is that it would be too inconvenient to explain to the higher-ups why 2 cops that work for the Empire died in the red light district. Cyril's boss cares more for what looks good on his stats and not for the lives of his men. Cyril's orders are to bury the murders and make them look like an accident. Cyril, being a stubborn detective of sorts, goes ahead with the investigation and hunts down the murderer. And this is what forces Andor to leave his planet and start working with Luthen, the shadowy rebel spy. The decision from the captain to bury the murders of his colleagues introduces us to the cold, bureaucratic mentality of the Empire. For the officers that call the shots, people's lives don't mean much. They are just numbers, statistics on a form, and if the numbers don't match, then that can get people hurt or killed. And it creates a blueprint for the whole season. People in power deciding the fate of characters that don't have much power to begin with, pushing them to join the cause of the rebels. From the first episode, the criticism of power structures in Andor is quite clear. The characters of the show are split into social castes of sorts. There are the people that have power, then there's everyone else. Luthen, Mon Mothma, Deidre, they all live in different parts of the galaxy, and they want to achieve different things, but the common thing between them is that they all enjoy the privilege of wealth and power. These characters can make mistakes and receive very little or no consequence at all for their actions. Luthen is untouchable. His identity as a spy master is secure at the end of the first season, even if he has to let his own men die so he won't betray the identity of another rebel spy. Mon Mothma has to marry her teenage daughter off to a less credible member of society, but mostly she stays off the radar of the Empire. Deidre demonstrates her cold, bureaucratic disregard for human life all season, but when her own life is on the line in the last episode, Cyril comes along and saves her. Because he knows that's the only way to get his own life back on track, and thus get himself over the line where the real power resides. After the disastrous attempt to arrest Andor in episode 3, many of his colleagues died and Cyril lost his job, and whatever little standing he had with it. It was interesting that even a higher-up security officer like him had so little authority or even importance. Cyril could do nothing to alter his fate, because much like Andor and his friends, Cyril belongs to the wrong social class. The common thing between these characters is that they are all unwittingly part of a worker caste of sorts. These are people that have very little connections and money, and when something bad happens, they can find themselves in trouble quite easily, as it happens when Andor gets mistaken for someone else later in the season and ends up in prison. This difference of social castes and how much power they yield becomes even more apparent as the season progresses, and we get a better glimpse of not only the past and present of Andor, but how the rest of the characters are affected by it. Andor has been a victim of the Empire from an early age, after some industrial accident that caused a huge environmental catastrophe on his home planet of Kenari. Andor and some other kids were forced to grow up alone and fend for themselves. And when later on the Empire came back for the cover-up, Andor was barely saved by Marva, a scavenger who later became his adoptive mother. Because of his difficult childhood, Andor has a strong disdain for authority figures and the structures and the regimes that they serve. He wants to be free of any constraints that will hold him down to one place or to one relationship. His sense of independence and individualism creates quite a lot of problems for his friends. He doesn't trust people easily and doesn't stay in one place too long. After the successful heist in episode 6, Andor has gotten away with the money and seemingly all is good. But because the heist embarrassed the Empire, he ends up in prison. Not only because he was in the wrong place at the right time, but because the Empire needed to make some arrests, so they can look like they're being tough on crime. This group of episodes in the prison is easily the best part of Andor. In the prison, the barefoot workers are split into teams and spend most of their time constructing some kind of machinery for the Empire. The team that comes first gets more food, while the one that comes last gets electrocuted for their troubles. Not by guards, mind you, but automatically by the floor itself. I really like that the show doesn't even bother trying to make the guards be the bad guys. It maintains that the real villain of the story is the cold bureaucratic regime of the Empire, and what better way to represent that than by the automatic and inhuman punishment of the workers. The loss of independence, of action and thought, is always a danger when living under an authoritarian regime, especially inside the prison, and that danger is personified by the character of Kino Loy, played brilliantly by Andy Serkis. Kino Loy is the supervisor of the prisoners in his particular sector. He blindly follows orders, making himself and his prisoners under his command another cog in the machine of the Empire. His misguided professionalism hurts the other prisoners, and he doesn't really see it. Not until the last episode inside the prison. He reminded me of the lead character in the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai. There, the officer was constructing a bridge for the Japanese army during World War II. He felt so proud of his work, so proud of being a decent soldier again, that he failed to recognize how he was helping the enemy by building them the bridge that would be used to transport their army, and that would end up costing the lives of his fellow soldiers. For Kino Loy to wake up and see what he has done in Andor, a whole floor of prisoners has to be electrocuted, and that pushes him to join Andor and escape from the prison. The end of the first season finds Andor joining Luthen and the Rebels' cause. It was not an easy decision. No one forced Andor to do this. It was a choice that was very much simmering all season. Because Andor grew up alone and he has a strong sense of independence and disdain for authority figures, Andor cared always for himself and was not particularly interested in the society around him. But the show put him in a position where he had to experience the suffering of himself and the others inside the prison. The loss of freedom and individualism pushed him to empathize with the rebels, understand their cause, and in the end, join them. It was very refreshing to see a well-written character and story that doesn't separate people in black and white terms, good guys and bad guys, Jedi and Sith, wearing bright and dark colors, so the audience can tell them apart. Instead, the show takes a new direction and split characters into people that have kindness and people who don't. And in a cutthroat world like Andor's, that makes all the difference. Consider the character of Luthen. He's supposed to be one of the good guys, a rebel intelligence officer, but he would gladly sacrifice Andor and all his friends if it gave him the upper hand in the fight against the Empire. Characters like that are what makes Andor special. Some details before I leave you. The strong sense of individualism in Cassian Andor is also present in virtually all the characters that are part of the worker caste. Their life might be difficult and hard, but they're proud people and they find strength amongst each other. But for their counterparts, the employees of the Empire have a staggering lack of independence of action and thought. They even get punished if they take the initiative if it's not pre-approved by their boss. All the scenes that take part in rooms where the Empire has full authority look quite similar in style and tone. Bureaucrats and intelligence officers all wear similar uniforms and work in dark grey rooms, surrounded by endless cubicles. It's like the show is trying to say that when authoritarian regimes force people into conformity, then those people can lose part of their independence and they can easily be controlled. Also, props to the show that they hired only native English-speaking actors for officers of the Empire. It connects with George Lucas's decision when he used the same trick to make a comment about the imperialism of authoritarian regimes. Although his films were mostly about American imperialism, the use of the British accent in Andor works quite well to differentiate between social classes, with the actors that play characters in the worker cast speaking mostly a variety of different dialects. In the end, I very much enjoyed Andor. The politics between social classes was handled really well, the cinematography felt gritty and real, reminiscent maybe of Blade Runner, especially in the first episode. We don't get to see too often such a well-written story of dark, complex characters in the Star Wars universe. Let's hope the second season is as good or even better than the first. So, that's it for today, guys. See you in the next video.